The assembly hall of Kepler Military Academy buzzed with nervous energy. Hundreds of cadets from dozens of species filled the massive chamber, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few glowed faintly in the dim lighting. Near the back row, Corporal Dae-jung sat quietly among his fellow cadets, his simple human form almost boring compared to the exotic aliens around him. Instructor Malthus stepped onto the platform. The ancient Centaurian was a legend at the academy. His 3 eyes scanned the crowd with the confidence of someone who had survived 1,000 battles. His reptilian skin bore scars that told stories of wars across the galaxy. When he spoke, every cadet listened. "In 3 days you will face the survival assessment on Verdania 9, Malthus announced. His voice echoed through the hall. "This moon will test everything you have learned. You will be dropped in teams of 4. You will have basic supplies but nothing more. No weapons, no advanced tools. You must craft everything from the resources around you." A murmur ran through the crowd. This was the assessment that separated the elite from the average. Many cadets failed. Some didn't come back at all. "The jungle of Verdania 9 is hostile," Malthus continued. "Predators hunt in packs. The weather changes without warning. Resources are limited. You will be judged on 4 criteria: weapon quality, shelter construction, food procurement, and combat readiness. The weapon portion is especially important. We expect durability, effectiveness, and craftsmanship." Coven stood up from his seat. The Zytheran cadet was built like a stone statue with gray skin that looked harder than metal. His people came from a high-gravity world where only the strong survived. "Instructor, how much time do we have for weapon forging?" "You have 1 week total," Malthus replied. "Manage your time wisely. Remember, a warrior is only as good as their blade." Coven nodded with satisfaction. He turned to the cadet next to him and spoke loudly enough for others to hear. "My people have forged blades for 10,000 years. I will create a weapon worthy of my ancestors. It will take me at least 12 hours, but it will be perfect." Several seats away, Hera raised one of her forearms. The Veltraxian female had silver skin and large black eyes that seemed to absorb light. Her species was known for technical precision. "Instructor, will we have access to mineral deposits? I will need specific compounds to create a plasma edge on my blade." "You will find what you need if you look carefully," Malthus said. "Verdania 9 has everything required for traditional weapon crafting." Hera nodded and began making notes on her datapad with 2 hands, while the other 2 hands adjusted her equipment belt. She was already planning her weapon design. Dae-jung said nothing. He simply listened and observed. Around him, cadets discussed their weapon-making techniques with pride. The Braxians talked about their crystal forging methods. The Keltharians debated the best way to shape metal without modern tools. Every species had ancient traditions passed down through generations on how to create the perfect weapon. To most of them, humans were newcomers. Earth had only joined the galactic community 200 years ago. That was nothing compared to civilizations that had existed for millions of years. Many aliens saw humans as soft creatures who had barely survived on their little blue planet. They had no claws, no armor plating, no natural weapons. They seemed weak. After the briefing, cadets were given their team assignments. Dae-jung found himself paired with Hera, Coven, and a nervous insectoid named Tira. Tira was small and fragile-looking, with thin limbs and large compound eyes. She came from a hive species that rarely sent individuals to military training. "I hope I don't slow you down," Tira said quietly, her mandibles clicking with anxiety. "You won't," Dae-jung assured her. "We all have different strengths." Coven looked at Dae-jung with barely concealed doubt. "What is your weapon specialty, human?" "I have heard Earth has no traditional forging culture." "We have some methods," Dae-jung said simply. "How long will your weapon take to make?" Hera asked, her technical mind already calculating team schedules. Dae-jung thought for a moment. "Maybe 30 seconds, Kovan laughed. It was a deep rumbling sound like rocks grinding together. 30 seconds? Impossible. Even the fastest Zytheran smiths need 4 hours for a basic blade. "Are you joking?" "No joke," Dae-jung said calmly. Hera's 4 hands stopped moving. She studied Dae-jung with her large eyes. "What kind of weapon can be made in 30 seconds? "A useful one," Dae-jung replied. The team didn't know what to make of this strange human. Kavan clearly thought Dae-jung was either lying or foolish. Hera seemed curious but skeptical. Tira just hoped everyone would get along. Over the next 2 days, the academy prepared the cadets for deployment. They received survival packs with basic items, water purification tablets, emergency medical supplies, a fire starter, and rope. No knives, no tools, nothing that could be used as a weapon. They would have to create everything else. Daejung spent his preparation time differently than the others. While Kovan studied ancient Zitharan forging texts and Hira reviewed chemical compositions of various plants and minerals, Daejung went to the Academy's geological collection. He examined different types of stone, testing their weight and texture. He picked up pieces of flint, obsidian, and chert, feeling how they broke when struck. An older human instructor found him there. Her name was Admiral Yi-sun, one of the highest-ranking humans in the galactic military. She had gray hair and calm eyes that had seen many battles. "Preparing for Verdania 9? She asked. "Yes, ma'am," Daejung replied. Yi-sun picked up a piece of flint. "My grandfather taught me stone knapping when I was young. Back on Earth in the mountains. Most people thought it was just a hobby, a historical curiosity, but he told me something I never forgot." "What did he say?" "He said that humans survived ice ages, super predators, and climate disasters with nothing but rocks and determination. While other animals had claws and fangs, we had the ability to make tools anywhere, anytime. That was our real weapon." Daejung nodded slowly. "The others think I'm crazy. They're planning 12-hour forging sessions." Yi-sun smiled. "Let them plan. You just do what humans have always done. Adapt, survive, and maybe teach them something along the way." On the morning of deployment, the teams gathered at the launch bay. Massive transport ships waited to carry them to Verdania 9. The cadets were excited and nervous. Many had spent the previous night in prayer or meditation, preparing themselves mentally for the challenge. Kovan had brought reference materials on traditional forging. Hira carried samples of minerals she wanted to find. Other teams had similar preparations, carrying knowledge passed down through countless generations. Daejung carried only his basic survival pack. His hands were empty. As they boarded the transport, Tira moved closer to Daejung. "Are you really not worried?" she asked quietly. Daejung looked out at the stars through the viewport. "I'm worried about a lot of things. Making a weapon isn't one of them." The transport engines roared to life and they began their descent toward the green moon below. The drop pod screamed through Verdania 9's atmosphere like falling stars. Inside Pod 47, Daejung's team held tight as the small craft shook violently. Through the small window, Daejung could see the moon's surface rushing up to meet them. Thick jungle covered everything, a sea of green stretching to the horizon. The canopy looked dense enough to walk on. The pod's retro rockets fired at the last moment, slowing their descent just enough to avoid a deadly impact. They hit the ground hard, and the door blew open with a hiss of compressed air. Hot, humid air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet earth and unknown plants. "Everyone out," Kovan ordered, already taking charge. The Githaran was built for this kind of environment. His heavy frame seemed perfectly suited for the thick jungle. The team emerged into a small clearing near a rocky riverbank. The river was maybe 20 meters wide, flowing fast over smooth stones. Tall plants that looked like bamboo grew thick along the banks. Strange bird-like creatures called from the canopy above, their voices echoing through the trees. Hira immediately began surveying the area with all 4 of her arms moving in different directions. She pulled out a small scanner from her pack. "There are clay deposits approximately 300 meters north, and I'm detecting mineral traces that should work for my plasma edge compound." "Good," Kovan said. He was already gathering stones, examining each one carefully. "I need specific rocks for my forge. The temperature must be precise or the blade will have weak points." Tira looked overwhelmed by the jungle's size and noise. "What should I do?" "Start gathering plant fibers," Hira told her. "We'll need strong binding materials for the weapon handles. Look for anything with long, flexible strands." The 3 aliens immediately went to work on their tasks. They moved with purpose and efficiency, following plans they had clearly thought through in detail. Kovan began constructing a small forge, carefully stacking flat stones in a specific pattern. Hira started mixing compounds from plants, grinding them with rocks into a paste. Tira carefully selected plants and began extracting their fibers. Daejung walked to the riverbank. The water was clear enough to see the bottom. Smooth stones of various sizes covered the riverbed, worn down by countless years of flowing water. He stepped into the shallow edge, feeling the cool water around his boots. He bent down and picked up a flat, oval-shaped stone about the size of his palm. It was gray with hints of brown, probably some kind of chert or similar stone. He hefted it, feeling its weight. Then he selected another stone, this one smaller and harder. Dae-jung sat down on a dry rock near the water's edge. He held the flat stone in his left hand and the smaller stone in his right. Then he struck them together at a precise angle. Crack. A thin flake of stone broke away from the larger piece, leaving a sharp edge. The sound made Hira pause in her work. She looked over at Dae-jung, confused. "What are you doing?" "Making a knife," Dae-jung said calmly. He struck the stones again. Crack, another flake fell away. The edge was getting sharper. Kovan stopped arranging his forge stones. He walked over to watch Dae-jung work. "That is your weapon-making process? Hitting rocks together?" "Yes," Dae-jung said. He continued striking, each hit precise and controlled. Crack, 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 but where is your forge? Kovan asked. "Your kiln? Your heating method? Don't need them," Dae-jung replied. Hira approached now. All four eyes focused on Dae-jung's hands. "How long will this take?" Dae-jung held up the stone. In less than 30 seconds, he had created a wicked sharp edge along one side of the stone. It wasn't pretty, but the edge looked like it could cut through leather easily. Done. The three aliens stared in complete silence. That's it?" Tira asked, her voice barely a whisper. "For now," Dae-jung said. He picked up a piece of the bamboo-like plant and began splitting it with his stone blade. It cut through the green wood smoothly. He shaped the bamboo into a handle, then used some vine he pulled from a nearby tree to bind the stone blade tightly to the handle. 3 minutes after sitting down, Dae-jung stood up with a completed knife. It wasn't beautiful. It didn't have any decorative elements, but it was sharp, functional, and ready to use. Kovan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His entire worldview was being challenged. His people had refined forging techniques over 10,000 years. The process was sacred, requiring patience, skill, and respect for the craft, and this human had just made a blade in less time than it took to boil water. "But that will break easily," Hira finally said, trying to process what she had just witnessed. "Stone is brittle. It's not durable." "Probably," Dae-jung agreed. He walked back to the river and picked up another flat stone. 30 seconds later, he had another blade. "So I'll make another one." He made a third blade, then a fourth. In the time it took Kovan to properly arrange his forge foundation, Dae-jung had created 6 different cutting tools, each slightly different in shape and size. He had small blades for detailed work, larger blades for chopping, and scrapers for cleaning. "This is not traditional weapon making," Kovan protested. "Where is the artistry?" "The craftsmanship?" Dae-jung tested one of his blades by cutting a thick vine. It sliced through cleanly. "My ancestors used this method for 2.5 million years. It kept them alive through ice ages and climate disasters. It's not artistic, but it works." Hira sat down slowly, her technical mind racing. 2.5 million years? You used stone tools for that long?" "Yes," Dae-jung said. "We only invented metalworking about 10,000 years ago. Before that it was all stone." "But why?" Hira asked. "Why not advance faster?" Dae-jung smiled. "Because we didn't need to. Stone tools worked. They were everywhere. They were free. And anyone could make them. Why spend 12 hours making a metal knife when you can make a stone knife in 30 seconds? Kovan looked at his partially built forge. He had already spent 2 hours on it and had many more hours to go. His blade would be magnificent when finished, stronger and more beautiful than Dae-jung's simple stone tools. But Dae-jung already had 6 working tools and was using them to cut bamboo for shelter. "This is cheating," Kovan muttered. "This is efficiency," Dae-jung replied. He had already started building a frame for a shelter using the bamboo he had cut. His stone tools made quick work of the plants. Tira approached Dae-jung shyly. Could you teach me? To make the stone blades?" "Sure," Dae-jung said. He handed her 2 stones and showed her the angle to strike. "Hit here, quick and sharp." "Don't be afraid to break it. Stone is everywhere," Tira tried. Her first attempt failed, the strike too weak. Her second attempt worked, and a small flake broke away. She made a clicking sound of excitement. Hira watched Dae-jung work for a long moment. Then she made a decision. "Kovan, we should reconsider our approach. Look around. Other teams will spend all day on their weapons. But Dae-jung is already building shelter. He's already prepared to gather food. He's already secured. Coven's pride warred with his common sense. Finally, he sighed deeply. Human, teach me your method. I will still build my forge for a proper blade, but I should have something to use while I work. Daejung nodded and showed Kovan the technique. The Zatharan's strong hands were actually perfect for stone knapping. Within minutes, Kovan had made a crude but effective blade. He stared at it in his hand, feeling its weight. This is what your species used to hunt animals? Kovan asked. This is what my species used to hunt animals that could kill us in one bite, Daejung corrected. We weren't the strongest or fastest, but we could always make tools. Anywhere. Anytime. As the sun began to set on their first day, the difference between teams became clear. Through the jungle, they could hear other teams still working on their forges and kilns, following ancient traditions that required hours of preparation. Daejung's team had fire, shelter, and multiple weapons. They had already set up a water collection system and scouted the surrounding area for food sources. While others were still crafting their first blade, Daejung was teaching his team to make a dozen different tools. Hira worked with her compounds while using a stone knife to process plants. Kovan built his traditional forge while keeping a stone axe nearby for protection. Tira had made 3 small blades and felt proud of each one. That night, sitting around their fire, Kovan finally spoke what they were all thinking. The galaxy has been wrong about humans, he said quietly. The morning sun filtered through the jungle canopy, creating patterns of light and shadow across Daejung's camp. Their shelter stood solid and waterproof, built with bamboo frames and large leaves. A small smoking rack held strips of meat from a jungle creature they had trapped during the night. Fresh water sat in containers made from hollowed bamboo. The camp looked organized and lived in, comfortable even. In contrast, the sounds of frustrated work echoed through the jungle from other team locations. Somewhere to the north, cadets argued about forge temperatures. To the east, someone was crying after their kiln collapsed. The assessment was only on day 2, and already many teams were exhausted from the intensive weapon-making process. Daejung sat near the river, teaching Hira a new technique. This is called pressure flaking, he explained, using a piece of antler he had carved to press small flakes off a stone blade. It gives you more control over the edge shape. Hira watched with all 4 of her eyes focused intensely. Fascinating. With my 4 hands, I can stabilize the stone better than you can. She tried the technique and quickly mastered it, her additional limbs giving her an advantage. I see why your species developed fine motor control. You had to make these tools work. Exactly, Daejung said. We weren't born with claws or fangs, so we made them. And we made them everywhere we went. Kovan emerged from the jungle carrying an armload of specific clay he had been searching for. His traditional forge was nearly complete, a beautiful structure that showed generations of Zatharan knowledge. But now he also carried a stone axe on his belt, one of several tools he had made under Daejung's guidance. The forge will be ready by tonight, Kovan announced. I will create a blade worthy of song, but I admit these stone tools have been useful. He gestured with the stone axe. I cut my way through thick vines this morning in minutes. Normally I would have needed to wait for a metal blade. Tira returned from checking their trap lines. We caught 3 more of those rabbit creatures, she said excitedly. Her confidence had grown tremendously. She now wore a belt with 4 stone knives of different sizes, and she knew how to use each one. The team had found their rhythm. They worked together efficiently, combining their different species' strengths. Hira's forearms and technical knowledge, Kovan's strength and tracking skills, Tira's small size and ability to climb, and Daejung's tool-making speed and survival knowledge. Around midday, voices approached through the jungle. Another team emerged into view, and they looked rough. 5 cadets from various species, all clearly exhausted. Their leader was a human named Taemin, from one of the wealthy colony worlds. He wore academy colors proudly, and walked with the confidence of someone used to the best equipment. Taemin stopped at the edge of Daejung's camp, looking around with obvious surprise. You're settled, he said, disbelief in his voice. Day 2, Daejung replied simply. Can we help you? Taemin's team looked hungry and tired. One of them, a tall Braxian, stared at the smoking meat with desperate eyes. Another cadet was limping badly. We're fine, Taemin said quickly, though his team's condition said otherwise. We've been focused on proper weapon forging. I spent 18 hours creating this. He held up a blade with obvious pride. The weapon was beautiful. It had been carved from a piece of crystal, with plasma etching along the edges creating patterns that glowed faintly. The handle was wrapped in carefully prepared leather, and the whole thing was perfectly balanced. It was a masterpiece. That's impressive craftsmanship, Dae-jung said honestly. Thank you, Taemin replied, relaxing slightly. Then he noticed Dae-jung's belt, which held several simple stone blades. What are those? My tools, Dae-jung said. Taemin's expression changed from pride to disgust. Stone? You're using stone tools? You're representing Earth at this academy, and you're embarrassing our entire species with primitive rocks? The insult hung in the air. Kovan and Hira exchanged glances. They had learned respect for those primitive rocks over the past 2 days. Dae-jung stood slowly. He gestured around their camp. We have shelter. We have food. We have water. We have fire. We have functional weapons and tools. How about your team? Taemin's jaw tightened. Behind him, his team members looked at the ground. The truth was obvious. They had no shelter. They were hungry. They were exhausted from spending all their time on weapon creation. We have quality, Taemin insisted. You have quantity. When the combat trials begin, my blade will cut through your stones like they're nothing. Maybe, Dae-jung agreed. But if it breaks, how long until you make another one? It won't break. It's perfect. Nothing is perfect, Dae-jung said. He picked up a stone from the ground. If my blade breaks, I make another one. 30 seconds. What about you? 18 hours? One of Taemin's team members, a Keltharian, spoke up quietly. He has a point, Taemin. We've been so focused on making perfect weapons that we haven't prepared for anything else. We haven't eaten since yesterday morning. Silence, Taemin snapped. But the damage was done. His team's morale was clearly low. Hira stood up, her forearms crossed. Your blade is beautiful, human Taemin. It shows skill and patience. But skill and patience mean nothing if you starve before the combat trials. Dae-jung's methods kept our team alive and healthy. That is what matters, Taemin's face reddened. You aliens don't understand. There's a right way to do things, a civilized way. Not this caveman nonsense. Kovan stepped forward, and when a Zytheran stepped forward, people paid attention. His massive frame towered over Taemin. I am Zytheran. My people have forged blades for 10,000 years. I thought like you. I believed tradition and perfection were everything. He pulled out his stone axe. Then this human showed me that survival doesn't care about tradition. I am building my forge because I want to, but I'm alive and fed because of these stone tools. Taemin looked at his team, then at Dae-jung's camp, then at his beautiful blade. For a moment, something like understanding crossed his face. Then his pride pushed it away. Keep your rocks, Taemin said. When we face each other in the arena, you'll see the difference between real weapons and children's toys. He turned and walked back into the jungle, his team following reluctantly. The Keltharian looked back once at Dae-jung's camp, longing clear in his eyes before disappearing into the green. He's going to fail the assessment, Tira said sadly. Maybe, Dae-jung replied. Or maybe he'll learn. People learn at different speeds. That afternoon, screams echoed from the western section of the jungle. The team went on alert, grabbing weapons. Through their communication devices, they heard emergency signals. A team had been attacked by predators. 2 cadets were injured. The team had been distracted by their forge work and hadn't posted proper sentries. Instructor Malthos's voice crackled through all communication devices. Attention all teams. This is not a simulation. The predators on Verdania 9 are real and dangerous. Stay alert. Protect your camps. Remember that survival is your first priority. After the announcement, Dae-jung noticed his team looking at their camp with new appreciation. They had posted sentries from day one. They had weapons ready at all times. They had prioritized survival over perfection. Thank you, Hira said quietly to Dae-jung. If you hadn't shown us your methods, we might have been like that team. Too focused on our weapons to watch for danger. Dae-jung shook his head. You would have figured it out. You're all smart and capable. I just showed you a different way. That evening, as Kovan finally completed his forge and began the long process of creating his traditional blade, he did so with stone tools on his belt and a proper camp around him. He worked on his blade because he wanted to honor his ancestors and practice his craft. Not because he needed to for survival. The difference was everything. By day 3, the pattern was clear across all teams. Those who had focused only on perfect weapons were struggling to survive. Those who had adapted quickly, who had learned from any source including the primitive human methods, were thriving. Daijung sat by the river, making his 20th or 30th blade. He had honestly lost count. He made them when needed and discarded them when broken. Each one took about 30 seconds. Each one was good enough, and good enough, he was learning, was often better than perfect. The transport ships arrived exactly 1 week after the teams had been dropped on Verdania 9. Daijung's team stood ready with their gear packed, looking healthy and alert. Around them, other teams looked very different. Some cadets had lost weight. Others bore injuries from predator encounters or accidents during weapon forging. A few teams had been evacuated early due to serious problems. The academy staff collected the weapons for inspection. Each team's creations would be judged before the combat trials began. This was standard procedure, evaluating craftsmanship, design, and practical effectiveness. Daijung placed his current stone knife on the examination table. Next to it, he set down several other stone tools he had made that morning. They were functional and sharp, but simple in design. No decorative elements, no artistic flourishes. The examiner, a Centaurian professor named Dr. Velthar, picked up one of Daijung's blades. He turned it over in his hands, studying it carefully. His expression was difficult to read. "This is your primary weapon?" Dr. Velthar asked. "One of them," Daijung replied. "How long did it take to create?" "About 30 seconds. Dr. Velthar's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. 30 seconds, he repeated flatly. "Yes, sir." The professor set down the blade and picked up another one. This one was slightly different in shape, designed for chopping rather than cutting. "And this one?" "Also about 30 seconds. Dr. Velthar made notes on his datapad. His expression showed clear disapproval. Next to Daijung's station, Kovan presented his Zitharan blade. It was magnificent, with perfect balance and a mirror-smooth edge. The professor spent several minutes examining it, nodding with appreciation. "Excellent work. Cadet Kovan. This shows remarkable skill and knowledge of traditional techniques." Hera presented her blade, which had a chemical edge that glowed faintly blue. The professor was equally impressed. Even Tira's woven handle wrapping earned praise for its intricate detail. But Daijung's simple stone tools received only silence and disapproving looks. That evening, cadets gathered in the academy's main arena. The combat trials would take place over the next 3 days. Teams would face various challenges designed to test their weapons and combat readiness. The arena could simulate different environments and situations, from dense forest to open plains. In the viewing stands, academy brass sat alongside military observers from across the galaxy. Among them was Admiral Yi Sun, who had specifically requested to evaluate the human cadet program. She sat quietly, watching everything with sharp eyes. Instructor Malthus stood at the center of the arena. "The combat trials will test your adaptability," he announced. "You will face opponents in controlled combat. You will encounter environmental challenges. You will deal with equipment failure. Real combat is unpredictable. We will see how well you handle the unexpected." The first matches began. Teams faced off against each other using their crafted weapons. Daijung watched as Taemin entered the arena with his beautiful crystal blade. His opponent was a Braxian with a traditional metal sword. The fight was brief. Taemin won easily, his blade cutting through the air with perfect precision. The crowd cheered. Taemin raised his blade triumphantly and it caught the light, creating rainbow patterns across the arena floor. Then came Daijung's turn. His opponent was a team led by a Keltharian warrior known for her speed and skill. She carried a curved blade that looked deadly and efficient. They faced each other across the arena floor. The Keltharian studied Daijung's simple stone knife with obvious confusion. "That's really your weapon?" she asked. "Yes," Daijung replied. "I almost feel bad about this," she said, but her eyes were sharp. She wouldn't underestimate him completely. The match began. The Keltharian moved fast, testing Daijung's defenses. He blocked and dodged, using his stone blade carefully. It held up well, the sharp edge catching her curved sword several times. Then, during a particularly hard block, Daijung's stone blade snapped. The tip broke away, leaving him with a much shorter weapon. The crowd murmured. Some laughed. The Keltharian pressed her advantage, sensing victory, but Daijung simply dropped the broken blade and pulled out another one from his belt. The whole motion took less than 2 seconds. The Keltharian hesitated, confused by the immediate replacement. She attacked again, and they fought for another minute. Daejung's second blade broke against her guard. He dropped it and drew a third blade. Now the Keltharian's confidence wavered. She realized something that the crowd was also beginning to understand. Daejung couldn't be disarmed. Not really. He carried multiple weapons, and he could make more anywhere there were rocks. She attacked more desperately now, trying to break all his blades. The third one broke. Daejung pulled out a fourth. This one was shaped differently, more like a short axe. He had made it that morning specifically for this kind of situation. The match continued for several more minutes. Daejung went through 6 different blades. Each time one broke, he simply grabbed another. The Keltharian grew more and more frustrated. Her single perfect blade was still intact, but she was tiring from the constant pressure. Finally, Instructor Malthus called the match. Draw. Both combatants have demonstrated skill, but everyone watching knew the truth. If the match had continued, the Keltharian would have exhausted herself while Daejung still had weapons to use. In the stands, a Galactic Committee observer turned to Admiral Yi-sun. That human's weapons kept breaking. Doesn't that show poor quality? Yi-sun smiled slightly. Or it shows he's never truly without a weapon. Tell me, what happens when a traditional warrior's blade breaks in real combat? The observer paused. They would be in serious danger. Exactly. But that human just showed that he can lose weapon after weapon and keep fighting. How do you defeat someone who can rearm themselves indefinitely? The observer sat back, thinking hard about what he had just witnessed. The next challenge involved environmental hazards. Teams were placed in a simulated swamp with thick mud and water hazards. Weapons fell into the water. Some were lost in the mud. Cadets who had spent days creating single perfect weapons watched in horror as they sank into murky water. Daejung stepped into the swamp and immediately made new tools from rocks along the shore. While other teams searched desperately for their lost weapons, he simply created new ones, 30 seconds per blade. He made them while standing waist-deep in mud. The third challenge was a team combat scenario. Daejung's team faced off against a mixed group of elite fighters. The battle was chaotic and brutal. Weapons clashed and broke. Cadets fought hand-to-hand when their blades failed. Kovan's beautiful traditional blade snapped during a powerful strike against Zitharan armor. He stared at the broken weapon for a moment, shocked. Then he pulled out the stone axe from his belt and kept fighting. It wasn't as elegant as his forged blade, but it worked. Hira's plasma edge blade lost its chemical enhancement after getting wet. She switched to a stone knife Daejung had taught her to make. Her 4 hands made her especially effective with shorter blades. By the end of the combat trials, a clear pattern had emerged. Teams that relied on single, perfect weapons struggled when things went wrong. Teams that had multiple tools and the knowledge to make more adapted successfully. The final match was between Daejung's team and Taemin's team. Everyone wanted to see this confrontation. The two humans representing different philosophies. Taemin's crystal blade was still pristine and beautiful. Daejung carried his usual collection of simple stone tools. The match began. Taemin fought with skill and precision. His blade was faster and sharper than Daejung's stone. But then, during a particularly aggressive exchange, the crystal blade struck the arena's stone floor at a bad angle. It cracked. Not broken, but damaged. A visible line ran through the beautiful crystal. Taemin's face went pale. His perfect weapon, his 18-hour masterpiece, was flawed. He became cautious, afraid to damage it further. His fighting style changed from aggressive to defensive. Daejung pressed the advantage. His stone blade broke against Taemin's guard. He grabbed another one. That one broke too. He grabbed a third, a fourth. A fifth. Taemin backed away, overwhelmed by the relentless assault. His perfect blade was still better than any single stone tool. But Daejung didn't need a perfect blade. He needed enough blades to keep fighting. Instructor Malthus stopped the match. Winner, Corporal Daejung. Superior adaptability and resource management. The arena fell silent. Then Admiral Yi-sun began to clap. Slowly others joined in. The applause grew until the entire arena was cheering. Taemin stood there holding his cracked crystal blade, understanding finally dawning on his face. 6 months after the Verdania 9 assessment, everything had changed at Kepler Military Academy. Daejung walked through the familiar corridors, but they felt different now. Where cadets used to ignore him or look down on humans, they now nodded with respect. Some even asked for advice. The biggest change was in the training schedule. A new course had been added to the mandatory curriculum: adaptive survival techniques, Stone Age methods. Daijung had been promoted to instructor, making him the youngest faculty member in the academy's history. His classroom was always full. Cadets from dozens of species gathered to learn the techniques that humans had used for millions of years. The irony wasn't lost on Daijung. These aliens came from civilizations that had existed for countless generations, some predating humanity by millions of years. And now they sat at stone tables learning to knap flint. Kovan was there too, now serving as Daijung's teaching assistant. The massive Zitharan held up a piece of obsidian, demonstrating proper striking angles to a group of younger cadets. Remember, Kovan explained, the goal is not perfection. The goal is function. You can always make it better later, but first you need it to work. Hira worked at another table, her forearms making her an excellent instructor for fine detail work. She helped cadets understand the different types of stone and their properties. Flint is reliable, she explained, but obsidian can be sharper. Chert is common and easy to work with. Learn to recognize what resources are available. Even Tira had become an instructor, teaching smaller cadets who were nervous about the physical aspects of toolmaking. Her gentle approach helped many students overcome their fear of failure. The transformation hadn't been easy. After the assessment results went public, there had been significant debate across the galactic military network. Some traditionalists insisted that the stone tool success was a fluke, that real combat required advanced weapons. Others argued that the Academy had compromised its standards by accepting such primitive methods. But the video footage from Verdania 9 told a clear story. Teams that adapted thrived. Teams that focused only on perfection struggled. The data was undeniable. Admiral Yi Sun had used that data to push for widespread changes in military survival doctrine. Today she was visiting the Academy to observe the new program's progress. Daijung met her in the observation room overlooking his classroom. Through the transparent wall they could watch cadets of various species working together, making stone tools and learning ancient human techniques. Your grandfather would be proud, Yi Sun said quietly. I hope so, Daijung replied. Sometimes I wonder what he'd think about teaching aliens to knap stone. He'd probably laugh, Yi Sun said with a smile. Then he'd remind you that good knowledge should be shared, regardless of who needs to learn it. Below them, a young Braxian cadet successfully made her first stone blade. Her crystalline features actually lit up with excitement as she held the simple tool. Her instructor Kovan nodded with approval. The Galactic Military Council is meeting next week, Yi Sun said. They want you to present your methods to the full assembly. Daijung felt his stomach tighten. That's a lot of high-ranking officials. Yes, it is. And many of them still don't understand why we're teaching Stone Age technology in an advanced military academy. Yi Sun turned to face him directly. They need to hear it from you. Not from me. Not from reports. From the human who lived it. A week later, Daijung stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Military Council. The chamber was enormous, with seats rising in curved tiers around a central platform. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled those seats, their various forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity. Daijung wore his instructor uniform, but he felt very small in this vast space. On the platform beside him was a simple table with various stones and tools. A Veltraxian general stood to address the assembly. His name was General Tar, and his forearms gestured dramatically as he spoke. We are here to discuss the controversial changes to survival training doctrine, specifically the emphasis on what some call primitive technology. I believe this is a mistake. We should be teaching our cadets to use advanced weapons systems, not hitting rocks together like cave dwellers. Murmurs of agreement ran through parts of the assembly. Admiral Yi Sun stood. General Tar makes valid points, but he's asking the wrong question. We shouldn't ask whether stone tools are primitive. We should ask whether they work. Instructor Daijung, please demonstrate. Daijung stepped forward. His hands were shaking slightly, but he controlled it. He picked up 2 stones from the table. The entire assembly watched in silence. 30 seconds later, he held up a sharp stone blade. This is what I can create in half a minute, Daijung said, his voice amplified through the chamber. It's not beautiful. It's not sophisticated, but it can cut, chop, scrape, and defend. And if it breaks, He deliberately smashed the blade against the table. It shattered. I can make another one. He picked up 2 more stones. 30 seconds. Another blade and another one. Again, another blade. And another one. He made 5 blades in 3 minutes while the assembly watched. Each one was slightly different, adapted to what he found in his immediate environment. My ancestors survived ice ages with these tools, Daejung continued. They faced predators that could kill them with one bite. They lived through climate disasters that destroyed other species. They survived because they could always make one more tool, always adapt, always continue. General Tar stood again. But surely your ancestors would have preferred advanced weapons if they had them. You're romanticizing primitive survival. You're right, Daejung agreed. They would have preferred better weapons. But that's not the point. The point is that they survived without them. And that survival ability is what we're teaching. He gestured to the assembly. How many species here have lost critical military engagements because supply lines were cut? Because advanced weapons couldn't be repaired in the field? Because soldiers were too dependent on technology that failed? The silence in the chamber grew heavier. Every military officer present knew the answer. Every species had experienced such losses. We're not replacing advanced training, Daejung explained. We're adding a foundation, a backup system. We're teaching cadets that they're never truly without resources, that even in the worst situations they can create tools and continue fighting. A Centaurian admiral stood, her 3 eyes focused intently. But these tools break easily, as you demonstrated. How is that better than a proper weapon? It's not better, Daejung said. It's different. A proper weapon is superior in almost every way. But it takes time to make, and if it breaks, you're vulnerable during replacement. Stone tools break easily, yes. But I can make 50 while you make one. If 49 break, I still have one. If yours breaks, you have nothing. He paused, letting that sink in. And in 30 seconds, I have another one. A Zitharan general, an older warrior covered in battle scars, stood slowly. The young human speaks wisdom. My people have prided ourselves on our forging traditions for 10,000 years. We believe that a warrior's blade is an extension of their soul, but I have lost brothers in combat who were disarmed and could not recover. What good is a soul blade if you die waiting to forge another one? More voices joined the discussion. Some argued for tradition, others argued for practical adaptation. The debate grew heated, with representatives splitting along various lines. Finally, Admiral Yisun stood again. Perhaps we're asking the wrong question entirely. We're debating whether to teach stone tools as if it's a choice between old and new. But the real question is, do we want our soldiers to survive? She walked to join Daejung on the platform. I grew up on Earth. My grandfather taught me these same techniques as a child. I thought they were just historical curiosities, fun camping skills. Then I served in the frontier wars. My unit was stranded behind enemy lines for 3 weeks. We lost our supply drop. Our advanced weapons were damaged and couldn't be repaired. Yisun picked up one of Daejung's stone blades. A soldier in my unit, a young woman from the Asian highlands, started making stone tools. The rest of us thought she was crazy. But her tools helped us hunt for food, defend ourselves, survive until extraction. 6 of us lived because she remembered old skills. She set down the blade carefully. Sophistication is a luxury. It's wonderful when we have it. But adaptability is survival. It's what keeps us alive when sophistication fails. Humanity learned this lesson over millions of years. The galaxy can learn it much faster. The assembly hall fell silent. Then, slowly, the Zitharan general began a traditional warrior salute. Others joined in, each species with their own gesture of respect and agreement. The vote was close, but it passed. The new training methods would be adopted across the Galactic Military Academy system. Stone Age survival techniques would become part of standard curriculum. 3 years later, Daejung stood on a hillside overlooking the Academy's new training facility. Below, hundreds of cadets from dozens of species sat in groups learning to make stone tools. Human instructors worked alongside alien instructors, sharing techniques that humanity had used for millions of years. Coven approached, now wearing the insignia of a master instructor. We have a waiting list of 6,000 cadets for next term, he reported. Every military branch wants their elite forces trained in these methods. Hard to believe, Daejung said. 3 years ago, they thought I was crazy. 3 years ago, I thought you were crazy, Kovan admitted with a rumbling laugh. Now I teach Zitharan forge masters to make stone knives before they learn traditional forging. It has changed our entire training philosophy. Hira joined them, her 4 arms carrying data pads. The latest field reports show a 15% increase in survival rates for units trained in adaptive methods. And soldier confidence is up significantly. They know they can handle equipment failure now. Tira buzzed up on her gossamer wings. The junior cadets asked if you would tell them the story again. About your ancestors surviving the Ice Age. Daejung smiled. Which version? All of them, Tira said. They never get tired of hearing how humans survived for so long with just stone and determination. As they walked down the hill toward the training grounds, Daejung thought about his grandfather. The old man had taught him stone napping as a way to connect with the past, never imagining it would become relevant to the future. Never imagining that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations would one day learn from humanity's most primitive skills. Below, a young cadet successfully made her first blade. Her instructor, a human woman from Earth's African regions, nodded with approval. The cadet held up her simple stone tool like it was the most valuable weapon in the galaxy. And in that moment, in the most important way, it was. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy had spent centuries perfecting the art of making one perfect blade. Humans had spent millions of years perfecting the skill of making another one. And another one. And another one. As many as it took to survive,